Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hi, folks, and welcome to today's episode of the She's Bold podcast. I am back in Seattle after being in India for the past 3 weeks, and I am delighted to be home and enjoying the comforts of living in my beautiful city. There are so many things I take for granted here, like being able to brush my teeth with tap water, or just being able to walk out my door and go for a run in an environment where the air is fresh and I won't be stared at like some freak. It's just, very few people run in India, and such a small percentage of those runners are women. So it's just great for me that I can just walk out the door and go for a run and just not be stared at. So I'm home for a week, and believe it or not, I'm leaving next week for Morocco on a research trip for a future tour there. So my suitcase is literally laying open, and I'm pretty much just washing my clothes from India and repacking them for the trip to Morocco. Anyway, the She's Bold podcast. Thank you for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. This is where I feature conversations with women who have inspirational stories to share. These women are breaking new ground. They are creating amazing lives for themselves, and in doing so, they epitomize being bold. Now, I could talk about my adventures and accomplishments, and sometimes you do hear me talk about what I'm up to, like I was just in India, now I'm going to Morocco. But just hearing my story, you might say I'm an anomaly. That's why I want you to hear the voice of other women, because when you hear what others are doing, it makes you realize that what you're dreaming of, what you want to do, might just be possible. Hearing one person's story like mine, you could just write it off as a fluke. You could say, I have special talents or abilities or privileges, but you're hearing amazing stories from so many others. And in doing so, it makes you realize that accomplishing big things is possible for everyone. That's why you'll hear from amazing women from all walks of life, all ages, and all backgrounds, because nothing is stopping these women from thinking big and considering what's possible for their future. Today's guest, Lisa Betts-LaCroix, addresses just this topic as she wants to help change the language around aging and what's possible for us at any and every age. Lisa believes we all have our own unique superpower, and as host of the SuperPower U Podcast, she dives in with her guests to reveal their mental models and tactical skills to uncover their very own superpower. Lisa has an interesting background. Living in LA as an actor, she racked up credits in hundreds of television shows, films, and movies of the week. And after she and her husband moved to the Bay Area and started having kids, she co-founded a network of families who educate their children outside of traditional schools. You're likely familiar with homeschooling, unschooling, or any number of names that's called. She didn't like what she was seeing in public schools, so she took her kids' education into her own hands. Now, that's bold. Now, so is being on hundreds of television shows and movies, right? She's a bold woman. We know that. In her late 40s, she discovered ballroom dancing. And within a very short period of time, she was competing. She actually won the world title in Pro-Am American Rhythm Ballroom Dance. And that's after starting something in her late 40s. So that is a cool story. This conversation veers into some really interesting talk about how our current language around getting older just doesn't properly express what it means to age. Things have changed a lot, and I would say probably they've changed tremendously in the last 10 years or so. People are talking about living to 120, 125, 180. When we set limits on how old we think we might live for healthily, the words we choose affect the choices we make and how we're seen. As you'll hear in this conversation, neither of us has the answer yet to how best to approach the topic of our middle years, quote unquote middle years. But we're exploring and trying to figure it out. And if after hearing this episode, you have some ideas, by all means, share them with me. Before you listen to this conversation with Lisa, I want to share some fun news this month, and the month is March. I'm giving away a pair of Bluetooth headphones from Jaybird. To enter, all you need to do is email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com and tell me your 3 favorite episodes of the She's Bold podcast. Now, when you do that, tell me the episode, the person that the conversation was with, and why you liked that. You'll get an extra entry if you're subscribed to the She's Bold podcast newsletter, which announces each new episode. You can find a link to how to enter in the show notes and at shesboldpodcast.com/Jaybird. Also, just a little reminder that I'm asking for your support of the She's Bold podcast. I believe that podcasts should be free to listen to so that everyone has access to them. But I do need your help and support to continue bringing you these fantastic conversations. First and foremost, I'm asking you to become a patron of the show via Patreon. Just go to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon, and that will bring you to my Patreon page. As a supporter at just $5 a month, basically the cost of a bowl of soup, you'll be part of our growing community and have access to special written and audio content that is only for supporters of the show. You'll also have access to a supporters-only Facebook group. And look, it doesn't have to be $5 a month. You can join for $1 a month. And if you don't think that makes a difference, I assure you it does. It's like tossing a bit of spare change in a tip jar to your barista, and you don't question that. So yeah, by joining me on Patreon at any level, you're basically voting for the show and telling me you want more great content. And I'd be so incredibly grateful. Plus, you get karma points. You can subscribe at shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon. Now, there are other ways you can show your support as well. Make sure you're subscribed in whatever podcast app you're using to listen to this so you don't miss any episodes. And if you're new to the She's Bold podcast, go back and listen to previous episodes. There are so many great conversations here. While you're clicking that subscribe button, take a moment to leave a review or rating. By doing any of those things, super simple things, you're helping the podcast get some visibility. So subscribe, listen to previous episodes, and leave a review or a rating. Finally, please share this or any episode with someone whom you might think would enjoy it. Word of mouth is the biggest way a podcast audience grows. So I am relying on you. You hear that? I'm relying on you to help me with that. Okay. With that, please enjoy this conversation with the very inspiring Lisa Betts-LaCroix. So yeah, let's dive into just what we were talking about in terms of the world of podcasting, because it's crazy and it's so funny because you said yourself. Just repeat what you had said about why you started podcasting and some of your favorite podcasters and what you discovered.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love podcasts. I'm a complete podcast addict and I listen to them all the time. And I have so many shows that I love. And I noticed they were all men. Almost all men. There's a few exceptions that I was listening to when I first started, but mostly I love Tim Ferriss. I love Michael Gervais. He has an amazing interview with Jewel that I love.
Oh my God. I love that.
Did you hear that episode?
Oh my God. Yeah.
I love that episode.
I know. She's on my list, my wish list.
And interestingly, that episode is a little bit different from a lot of his other ones, but it's probably one of my favorites of his. But I just love, in his case, how tuned in he is. And how he asks deepening questions, and he has a sort of humility about him that I really love. I love Peter Shankman, who exposed me to and helped me understand when I realized I have ADHD, and I came across his show, and it completely helped me embrace the way my brain works in such a deep way. I love his show.
I haven't heard his show. But
it's on ADHD. It's all about that ADHD is a gift, not a curse. And it clicked in for me how my brain works and who I am so quickly. I love Srini Rao's show. There's so many shows that I love, and they're all male hosts. And then so as a result, as is natural, I was noticing that they're almost all, they have a very high percentage of male guests as well. So as much as I was enjoying their shows, I was always thinking, oh my gosh, okay, please, more women, more women, more women. And then I realized, like is always the case, if you want something to happen, you kind of have to step into it yourself. So I thought, this is great. I want to have a podcast. I want to be the host of my own show. I have a background as a film and television actor and as a performer and doing voice work. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to do it.
You have a special skill set that just made it natural for you.
It made it natural. I love talking with people. I love going deep into what they're all about. And so, yeah, it was a perfect fit. And I just thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to have my own show. And it's been amazing. It's been so fun.
Yeah, it is great. You know, it's funny because I had that same response. Like this was a couple of years ago. And I would think, like, I'm the same thing. Rich Roll, Tim Ferriss, Ben Greenfield, all these male podcasters that I've really enjoyed. And I really enjoy the long form. I think that's one of the things that just really made it for me is like these long form conversations. But the same thing, I'm like, dude, why aren't you having more women on your podcast? And then what I told myself was, well, you know what? Maybe there just aren't as many women out there, maybe an expert in that field that they can get. So maybe that is the problem. And then I just thought, that cannot be the case.
It can't be true.
No, it can't
And
be.
so what was the transition like for you in terms of moving into that? Did you find that to be bearing out, or was it quickly evident to you that that's not actually true?
Well, you know what? That's kind of twofold. I would say on one hand, it's not true because I have been able to find many women who are doing really cool stuff, you know, who want to be on the podcast, you know, and the more research I do and I've got this like wish list of probably 150 people, you know, all over the country and all over the world that I eventually want to talk to. And that's growing constantly. I read an article and then I make a note and I'm like, okay, that person's on my list. Yep. The thing is that not all of them want to actually talk.
Interesting.
So that's what I find.
What's in the way with the people that don't want to talk? Why do you think?
You know, I'm not really sure. I can only guess that they don't. I mean, some have told me I don't have anything of value to offer. So they'll just come right out and tell me that. And the ones who, you know, that there's a lot of misses like, hey, I'm going to be in town or I'm going to be in your neck of the woods. You know, can we meet? There might be initial interest and then it just kind of disappears. Right. And I think that they're talking themselves out of the fact that they're just not, they wouldn't be a good guest.
Can I jump into something on that? It's a little bit of a jump in terms of, you know, possibly where our conversation might go, but I just want to jump into another part of the reason that I started podcasting. Another part of my story is very related to what you just said about they don't feel that they have a story to tell or anything worth saying. And 2 years ago, my mom died and she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in June of 2016. And she failed very quickly, as is the case a lot of times with pancreatic cancer. And as she got closer to dying, I started noticing myself reaching out and really wanting something from her, like knowing she's going to be gone. And so I would always be asking her, Mom, tell me something about your life. Tell me something. Give me something to hold on to. Give me a directive for life. And she would always say, well, you know, Lisa, there's not really much to say. And I realized through this process that my mom was someone who was quite stoic. She didn't believe that she had a lot of value or a lot of worth in her words. And so she was, partly because she was quite introverted, partly because she had a lot of, you know, I think certain elements of trauma in her life, but she was just didn't feel that her value or her voice was worthwhile. And during this period of time, it occurred to me that, wow, my mother gave me the gift, and my father and my sister. My sister's a singer-songwriter. My father's a singer, jazz singer, and photographer. And I was at the time, you know, earlier on an actor, and I've done different things. And I realized that she was the person behind all of us, giving us the space to have our voice in the world. And as she was dying and I was grasping out for something to hold on to, some directive from her, which she was basically giving me the idea that, well, it's not really worth it. I don't have really anything to say. After she died, I realized that to whatever degree I don't show up and share my voice, or I carry on some legacy of my voice or my opinion doesn't matter, that I'm modeling that for the world, and I'm also doing the disservice to potentially my kids in the future wanting something of me. Now, my kids are teenagers right now. They don't really want to hear my opinion about things, but you know what? They might at some point in the future.
Yeah.
And so if I can contribute to other women's voices being amplified, and if I can share my story and not hold myself back, I think it's important, and it's something that I gained and I was inspired by through the loss of my mom and seeing myself really wanting something to hold on to from her that was not there because she didn't feel that there was worth in her voice.
Yeah. And everybody has a story. We've certainly learned that from social media.
Exactly.
Everybody has a story.
And I love the stories of the people who aren't necessarily the influencers and the A-list people. I love the stories of people who are out there living life and doing things that are meaningful, even if they're not the top.
Yeah, yeah. And I just think for some reason, I mean, certainly I've spoken with plenty of women on the podcast, but there are people who I've chatted with, and they've just, they, like I said, they've just kind of disappeared. Like they're not, just doesn't work for them. They're just not interested. And they're doing cool stuff too, like really unique things. And I don't know, but I think that's all part of. I think that's all part of the reason why I podcast, and the reason why I think it's important that you're podcasting, that so many women are podcasting, to bring that message, to get that message out there, and talk to more women and find out what they're doing, find out what their story is.
Yeah, and because we live in a culture that it just has habitual responses. Sometimes I'll go to conferences or I'll see, there was recently a podcast article about the top 10 podcasts you should listen to. I think 8 of them were by men.
That was, was that the one with all the procasters on it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
the professional.
So. I think that was that one. But, part of it is a frame. And part of it is a presence, but, the more we get our voices out, and I do really feel strongly about highlighting women and amplifying women's voices, because both are true. Part of it's habitual and part of it is what's available. So,
yeah. Well, talk about your podcast. Since we're on that thread.
Okay, sure. Yeah. My podcast is, it's quite eclectic. And when I was looking at what my topic would be, I was conflicted because I have a lot of different interests. And this goes back to my story about being ADHD and, a multi-potentialite and, what I used to call myself a hack. And I'd always say, well, I have so many different interests. I'll be good at something when I'm 90. And, so I do, I train people in speaking, pageant girls, and high ability young Silicon Valley men. And I have a background as a film and television actor, and I'm a ballroom dancer, which I know you said you'd like to talk a bit more about. I've been really involved in progressive education and looking at the future of education outside of brick and mortar schools. I have a very wide range of interests. And so I thought, what am I going to, do my show on? So I guess the thing that it kept coming back to is that the overarching piece in all of the things, all of the areas of interest that I have is about mastery and about being strong and being good at what you do and embracing that as a starting point. So I started looking at the idea of superpowers. What's your superpower? What's your strength? And so my show is basically long form interviews with mostly women, but some men too, about that skill set or that strength that underlies everything that they've done. That's a through line that's always been present in their life, no matter the stage or the age. And that's almost so natural to them that it's like the water they swim in or the air they breathe. But to other people, it looks like they're scaling a vertical cliff. And I like to say that it's possible that you don't even necessarily know what your superpower is because it comes so naturally to you. And often people realize what theirs is when someone reflects it back to them or when it's been reflected back to them from multiple people. And so we basically talk on my show about what people are doing with their life, and then we explore, well, what's your superpower? And usually I'll ask them what they think first, but then sometimes I'll get a bit of a refinement, be like, wow, it sounds like, based on talking to you, it sounds like it's something like this. Because I'm always looking for that piece that's the through line, that's the omnipresent thing in your life. And yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
It's SuperPower U.
SuperPower U, the letter U, which is basically a double entendre on you and also like learning about,
right.
Like university or whatever. So yeah, SuperPower U.
Excellent. And you've been going about a little over a year.
I'm just published my 62nd episode this week.
Yeah. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
it. I've been really, really enjoying listening to it. So
Thank you.
I'm glad you're around. So let's go back a little bit, because I think where we're going to land is about age. I think we're about the same age or so.
Yeah, I'm just turned 54.
Just behind you a little bit. Well, so we'll talk about that, kind of end up there. But what I want to do is go back and find out more about your history, what led you to dancing, and then just talk about kind of what's in the future, what's going on now, what you're working on, and how that's going to play out.
Fun.
How you'd like to see that play out.
Good.
Where did you grow up?
Sounds good. I grew up in Toronto, Canada.
Are you Canadian?
I'm Canadian. Yes, I'm American too now. I grew up in Toronto, and I lived there for 30 years. And then when I was 30, I was a film and television actor through most of my 20s. And then when I was 30, I had that Saturn return experience that I don't know if you do know that term.
No, I don't.
So Saturn return, I guess it probably comes from astrology, although I'm not specifically into astrology, but I love the symbology of the fact that this astrological marker is about something that happens. I think the idea is that Saturn goes around, has a 30-year cycle of orbit. And so the idea is that every 30 years, something radical happens in your life. And for a lot of people, there's a common archetypal experience, but sometime between 29 and 31, that range, where all of a sudden your life changes and you shift gears and you suddenly realize that, wow, now this is my life. And you sort of shed all the cultural expectations, maybe expectation from your family. And for a lot of people around that time, they leave relationships that aren't the right ones. They change careers. They change location. They maybe move. They just change things a lot in their life. And that happened for me at 30. And I moved out to LA because I thought, okay, I have to do at least one pilot season. I was a film and TV actor, and I know I'm going to hate California because, I'm so much more down to earth, and California and LA is just some kind of, superficial, blah, 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 blah. Well, I landed in LA in January of 1995, and I fell in love with California.
You did?
I just fell in love.
What did you fall in love with?
Well, the weather, for one thing. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I mean, we're used to 5-month-long gray winters of cold.
So you can be outside year round.
Yeah. I just loved it. And truthfully, LA is a little hot for me. Now I live in the Bay Area, and that's really my jam in terms of weather and temperature. But at the time, just the air and the coolness and the freshness, and people were so friendly. And even though some of it was that LA let's do lunch thing, I found it really refreshing and connecting. And I also love acting. And loved acting. I love actors. I find actors to be deep and interesting. In order to be a really good actor, you have to be self-examining and growth-oriented and self-development oriented and, engaging and, explorative in terms of the inner world. That's what acting is all about at its best. At its best is really looking
I don't think I've
inward.
ever heard anybody put it in that framework before.
Yeah, to me, I just love
that it's like that. It's so inward. I wouldn't have. I mean, it makes total sense, but I guess I don't always give them credit for that,
right?
Because it all seems so superficial and shallow.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the outside, looking in, it looks superficial, and of course, there are superficial aspects of the film business. I mean, of course, there are, but for me, when I was an actor, I saw it completely as a process for looking inward and for self-development, and I almost envisioned it as almost like a martial art, where being in the acting world, being in the film business is like being in a dojo. And your task is to be in that world and be embracing it and interacting with it and grappling with it and working with it. But still, can you maintain your own stability, your own sense of self and your own worth when you're constantly being rejected, because everybody gets rejected. I mean, you cannot be in the film and television business without getting a lot of rejection. But for me, it was all about that. And then the other thing is, how do you build your range? How do you extend your range? If you're really strong in this particular, like, for example, I tend to come across as competent and together and strong. So for me, my growth edge as an actor was always, how do I dig into my vulnerability? How do I extend my emotionality? How do I get more authentic with my feelings? As they say in the acting world, oftentimes your life problems are your acting problems, your acting problems are your life problems. That was true for me as a human being, is that I can sort of be in competence, but it took me a longer time to really embrace authenticity and emotionality. So, I think there's a lot of parallels. I love the aspect of acting that is about going inward and developing and expanding your range as part of a human growth process, like part of who you are as a being.
Right. So unexpectedly, you fell in love with Southern California.
Yeah, and I fell in love with it. I lived in a lot of different areas. I lived in Topanga Canyon, which I just loved. I lived there for 5 years until I moved to the Bay Area after I had my first child.
So you got married in Southern California?
I got married in Southern California. I met my husband. He lived in San Francisco when I lived in LA. We met through a form of dance called contact improv, and we got married. He moved down there. And then after we had our first child, I started reading about coaching. This is in the year 2000 when no one knew what coaching was. It was like, oh, you mean it's like a soccer coach? And I read a book by a guy named Thomas Leonard called The Portable Coach. And I signed up and I took a coaching program. It was called Coach U. And in going through the process, like in coaching, you're examining all the different parts of your life, what's working, what's not. And so through this process, my husband and I decided that we would leave LA. I was no longer acting. I was supporting his business at the time, which was an electronics business. And let's move into an RV and let's leave the LA area and just travel around. I was going to coach. He was going to run a business that he was starting remotely, and we had a 16-month-old kid. We sold everything. We let go of our employees at the time, and then we moved into this RV, this very large RV, and we got all the way to San Francisco, and he started to work on building his company, which was it was 2000, year of the .com. Rents were insane, and he was building out this business that he was going to start that turned out to build the world's smallest Windows operating computer, very small, one of the very first personal small computers. And we got stuck there. And so we ended up, I'm coaching. I was coaching. I had a coaching business at the time. And we ended up living on the street in our RV for 13 months with our starting at 16-month-old to later. That was the first chapter of our, So
were you happy doing that? Living, you say in the street, but.
No, I mean, seriously, we lived at the time, we had our trailer parked outside of his startup warehouse, which was at 3rd and Army in the year 2000. It was not a nice part of San Francisco at that time. It's changed a lot now. We lived with the street people, one day we came out and we had a shower inside our RV. It was big. And then there was a shower inside the warehouse where the startup
Did you mind that?
I didn't mind it, except that living on the streets in San Francisco got quite old quite quickly. Now, at the time, I'm kind of a person, I just start communities. If I need connection with people, I'll start a community. So I got involved with some other people and we started a co-op. And we had about 8 families that had kids between 16 months and 3 years old. And we all took turns hosting.
Quote unquote homeless? Or
No, just us. But we did our day at the trailer because everyone took one day and now the kids would go to their house. And so we actually did it out of the trailer for a while.
I'm just trying to picture it. This is a situation where you're not totally embarrassed by it or trying to hide the fact. But it's an okay situation for you.
I thought it was really great.
Okay.
Basically, we're basically saying, hey, we're going to take on a different kind of life. Let's try. Our plan was to travel around the States. Our plan wasn't really to live at 3rd and Army for 18 months, which is what just ended up happening. Our plan was to travel around. I was going to do my coaching. We were going to be different parts of the U.S. And we just got stuck by circumstance. Because
it wasn't like you couldn't afford food.
Oh, no.
Not a street person like that.
Oh, no. I just, what I meant by that was that the people we were living around, because we were at 3rd and Army, everybody else in the trailers around us, most people don't live in a trailer in San Francisco. So the people that did were mostly homeless people. And in fact, one day we came out of our trailer and there was a guy dead hanging out of his Volkswagen, and he overdosed. And so what I was getting at was I loved the situation. And I could have done it for much longer if we'd been up on a hill in Marin. But we were at 3rd and Army in the heart of, it was kind of a harsh reality there. And so it didn't end up being where it had intended to be because we ended up staying there for my husband's company. We were all about, hey, let's create, we don't have to live our life in the box or in the way that it's been prescribed for us. And I've always kind of been like that. So it's like, well, what do we want to do, or how do we want to live in a way that's going to meet our need for freedom, our need for connection, our need for travel, like do things differently. So no, it was by design.
Okay. Eventually you got yourself in a house.
We did.
In the Bay Area.
Once after about 13 or 15 months, I said, okay, I think we're not doing our plan as we'd intended, right? I think we're here now. We're not leaving the Bay Area anytime soon. His startup had gotten going. I think they'd gotten up to 40 or 50 people. And so it became clear we weren't going to be doing the plan. So I said, I need to live in a warehouse. So we moved into a little warehouse in Dogpatch, and we lived there for a couple of years. And then I got really sick of living in San Francisco. And by one of those sort of serendipity things, I didn't even know the area that I live in, which is at the peninsula, the San Francisco Bay Peninsula existed. I decided to take my son on this field trip out to the Pacific Ocean. And in doing so, we passed this area that is the area I live in now. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know this existed. So 1 week later, by circumstance, I found this perfect house to live in. So we moved down there, and I've actually been down on the peninsula since then, and I love it down there. Yeah, it's close enough to San Francisco.
So you stayed home basically and homeschooled your kids through this whole time?
Yes, I would say, so just a little bit on language. I would say I didn't stay home.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
No. As soon as it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, I know that's not right.
No, it's totally fine, because honestly, that's the language, and that's the moniker that most people understand. So I use it for short form. But the reality is I'm not a stay-home kind of person. And so I like to say that I'll tell you that we homeschooled because that's the language most people understand. But the reality is that we didn't stay home much, and we didn't recreate school. We were actually looking for something that was different from school. So what we did and what we do, I call independent learning. And it's essentially designing a learning environment and a learning circumstance that's customized to each individual kid in my family, in my community, in my community and their families, they do the same. And it accesses all kinds of resources that we have available to us. And in the Bay Area, that's extensive. So it could be mentorship in the entrepreneurial world. It could be online courses. It could be, and there's a lot of online courses now. It could, what tends to happen a lot is people in our community will come up with a day of learning, and they'll put it out to other people. And so they'll populate a class with 8 or 6 or 10 or 15 or however many kids they can handle. And so it's basically just customized education, and it's outside of brick and mortar schools. And some people in our community actually have figured out ways where they can get their kids participating in schools 1 or 2 days a week. But, mostly it's independently designed education. And I did that starting from the time my first child was 7. And that child is now in college, and they're a sophomore at college now. And my second child, my daughter, is 14, and she's always been independently educated. She has never been to school, though she's getting interested, and she may go to high school. So a lot of it has to do with just meeting the needs of the kids as they show up. And
so the difference is that, because I have friends who homeschool, so the difference is
I don't teach my kids anything.
So they're not learning at home, but they're learning, as you said, in independent. Like you're not sitting them down and giving them
I don't
math.
sit down at some people think of homeschooling, right? Oh, let's sit down at the kitchen table.
Yeah, that's
we're going to do
think.
math. And then, 45 minutes is up now. Let's get out your literature workbooks. No, we don't do that, because for the most part, I don't know. I was looking for something a little different from school. And
was that available, or was this just literally something that you created? Independent learning.
At the time, that's my language. Some people in my community call it a la carte learning. Some people call it customized education. Some people call it homeschooling. Some people call it unschooling. And there's all different variations on how it's implemented. My vision is that sometimes I would call it community learning too, because independent learning implies that we're doing it totally alone. And I am a community-oriented person. I'm connection-based. My highest values are around connection and community. And so we actually are doing independent learning within the context of a community that I created with a friend primarily. So does it exist? Everything exists. That's the one thing that's happening right now in education, is that content used to be king. Now content's ubiquitous. We don't have to search very far. You can learn you just ask a young person where they learn things. YouTube is where people learn things now. You can learn anything you want online or from someone you know. all that's needed to learn anything is available at our fingertips. So did it exist? It didn't exist when I was young because we didn't have the same access to content as the kids have now. The community that I'm mostly involved with, that I started with a friend I'm a co-founder of, didn't exist. At the time, there was a lot of disparate connections, or people were connected through homeschooling communities. But my community is a little bit different.
And there's probably pockets of this all over the country.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, and especially if you use the moniker homeschooling. You just don't have to look. And unschooling has become very popular as a moniker now. Like everything else, I'm very interested in sort of like how we identify ourselves. And some people will say, I don't like labels. Well, I understand why people don't like labels, but I love language, and I love how we associate ourselves to words or to concepts or to communities, because it speaks a lot about our identification. Like, how do we identify? How do we connect?
Well, you need words to understand. Words. Yeah.
There's so much beauty in drawing connection between, how we feel and who we are and what we call it. And it doesn't have to be a box label. It's just a starting point, So anyway, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent.
No, I think I find it fascinating because I know so little about that world. So I just, I would love to hear about it.
Well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something that we can overlap in, because it'll relate. One of the wonderful things about our independent learning journey has been that we did a lot of traveling as a family. And as I told you before, I'm so fascinated by your business and by the fact that you've been able to, that you lead groups on these amazing trips. There's nothing like traveling and experiencing the world. And, so many kids are in school learning geography.
But they still couldn't tell you capitals of countries or
they've never experienced the things they're reading about.
Exactly. Well, that's what I mean. It just doesn't sink in if you're just reading it.
Right.
You have to get out there and experience it.
So one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing for many years, every second year, we would do a big trip. And so, for example, we would take our kids and we would go and we'd spend 3 months in France, and we would get tutoring in French. We would travel. We'd rent our house. And actually, I always tried to make our house, the rent that we got for our house, to pay for a lot of our trip. But we would go and we'd do our history. We'd learn about France. We'd read books about France, but then we'd go to the places. We'd go to the sewer tour in Paris. And then we'd drive down to the south of France and we'd do French tutoring. We spent 7 weeks in Greece one year. We spent 2.5 months in Thailand one year. And, we went back to France another time. And so that's something that really was available to us because we could independently design what our learning was going to be. It's gotten harder as my kids have gotten older and they've gotten their own lives. But, maybe my next incarnation will be joining something like what you're doing.
Yeah, but who knows? You have your 14-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Will be grown and won't need as much management or parenting.
But so I call that travel schooling. And so we basically, part of our independent learning was travel schooling. That's
fantastic, by the way. Just it's amazing. Anytime a person can get a young child out into the world, I'm all for that. I just think it's so important.
Yeah.
It builds confidence. I think that's the whole thing with women too, traveling. It's like you get out there and you travel and it builds your confidence and it gives you a whole new perspective on your own community. Just
totally.
Completely different. You look at people down the street differently because you have experienced something that they've experienced maybe in their home country.
Exactly.
So critical.
It is. I did a lot of traveling in my 20s. And when I, hear young people saying, "Oh, I'm thinking about going traveling," go.
Here's a backpack.
Go. I got so much perspective and so much insight from traveling. And the fact that you're encouraging people of all ages to travel is fantastic. I have an aunt who's 95 now, and she spent from the time she was, I think, around 75 to about 85, just traveling all over the world with companies like yours that supported women traveling in groups, because sometimes it's easier to do that if you're older.
Absolutely, yeah.
In my 20s, I went by myself, but
Yeah, I know. Oh, what an inspiration your aunt is. That's just great.
Totally.
Wow. Back to your story. So homeschooling, unschooling, community-based learning, all of this, these monikers that you have for it. The big question for me is, like, how did you make the leap from that, because that's kind of one world, to you're a dancer?
I told you I have ADHD, right?
Where did that come from?
Well, okay, so let's see. How can I tie that? It's not very related. Well, it's only related in the sense that as my kids started to get older, And I have been so involved in their lives in so many ways. I started an attachment parenting group. I was very immersed in the attachment parenting community for a long time, which I don't know if you know what that is, but
No,
it's
I don't.
people who believe that having very close connections with your kids and very secure attachments, whether it's through carrying the babies a lot, co-sleeping, extended nursing, that kind of thing, believe that creates a kind of security and bonded attachment in kids that gives them independence and freedom and a security to go out in the world. Now, there's a lot of information now about the vagal system and about how attachment wounds can really impact people's security. Vagal nerve.
Yeah, just for listeners who may not know that.
Yes, there's a lot of stuff about how attachment theory in adults and how that impacts. So attachment parenting is sort of related around the concept that how you raise kids, and if you give them a secure attachment, it gives them, they have a better chance at being securely attached adults in their relationships in the future. Yeah. So I was involved in that because I independently educated my kids at home. They didn't go to school. I was with my kids a lot. And I just saw this impending future of my kids leaving. And there's a part of me that just didn't want to be holding on. One of the things I tell my kids is that for parents, especially involved parents, one of our great challenges is knowing how to walk that fine line between being supportive and scaffolding them and knowing when is time to let go, and that it's not a simple journey. Sometimes we're holding on more than we should be, and sometimes we're letting go faster. It's a dance, So as I saw my kids getting older, I thought, I think, I need to get out and do something else for myself. And I happened to walk by the dance studio that I began dancing at, and I saw these teenagers. I didn't know this at the time, but they were high level competitive Latin ballroom dancers in their teens. And I looked through the window, and it was one of those Shall We Dance moments. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Shall We Dance. There's two versions.
I don't think I have.
There's an American version with Richard Gere, and there's a Japanese version, the original. And it's about a man who's coming home from his life. In his case, it was a dead life as a salesperson or something. And he glances into this dance studio, and he sees, in the American version, it's, I think, J-Lo, and someone else dancing this ballroom dance, and he just gets enraptured by it. And I kind of had an experience like that. I'm looking through the window going, oh my gosh.
Had you been to dance classes before?
I've done little bits of dance here and there. At the time I was 49, and I'd done little, as a kid, I did tap and I did ballet for a couple of years, and I did, and I'd done ballroom dance as a teenager for a little bit.
So it wasn't completely foreign to you?
No, I've done different kinds of dance. Always loved to dance, but I never really was deeply involved in dance. I was a film and television actor, and so I took dance classes as part of my acting training, that kind of thing. But no, I'd never really, but I had this moment where I was looking through the window, so I go, oh my God, whatever they are doing, I need to do that. I just need to do it. So
did you think that it was so beautiful or so captivating?
Captivating, sexy, connected, beautiful, intense, challenging, just everything. It just was all in that, just so amazing. And so anyway, I walked into the studio and I said, okay, I think I asked questions, and then I walked out, and then I don't know, a couple of days later, I went back and I asked questions again. I was like, okay, well, what kind of classes are they? I really didn't know anything about it. So, and I think that time I signed up for, and I bought a card of 10 or something. And then I never went back for 10 months or something. And then I started looking at other studios. And
had you talked to your husband about this, about dancing, or about wanting to dance?
Yeah.
And to see what his interest was?
At one point he tried it, but this particular, he is not really strong on steps.
Wasn't his thing.
Yeah, it wasn't really his thing. So, anyway, I ended up finding a teacher that I really liked. And at the end of 2013, I'd been taking, a few classes here and there. And I said, okay, I have this goal. I'm going to, I do goals at the end of the year. And I said, okay, my goal for next year, 2014, is I'm going to compete. And then, I don't know, 2 weeks after that, I think this teacher said, you know what, you should compete. I was like, oh my, okay, I can't believe you said that. Okay, I'm going to do it. So I basically trained for about 3 months, and then I did my first competition. I just completely fell in love with competing. And I did, I think, 6 competitions that year. The next year I did 10. And the year after that I did about the same. And
wow.
So I love competing. I love performing. I love the aspect of competing, actually, that is all about challenging yourself. It's having a benchmark. It's about just, it kind of goes back to that acting thing. Can you put yourself in the line of fire and be under stress and have to walk through your own challenges of insecurity, or I'm not good enough, or you didn't win, or, whatever it is. And can you still maintain your own sense of self? Can you still maintain your commitment to growth and to your own learning? Can you still maintain a passion for the process? So I love it for that aspect of that opportunity.
And you're still dancing now?
I am. I have, when my mom died, I ended up taking a bit of a break. And so I dance actually a lot of different forms. I've sort of gone back to my true nature of being multi-focused. So I actually do the type of dance I started in, which is called American Rhythm, which is, that's where I started. It's the American version of the Latin dances. So I don't do that now. I do the international style of the Latin dances, which is called International Latin. It includes cha-cha, rumba, samba, jive, and pasadobas, which I just started this form. I did American Rhythm for a while. And then I just also started on standard, which is the upright dances. So like waltz and quick step and foxtrot, those kind of things.
How often
Tango.
are you going to dance classes?
I'm usually dancing about 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Either practicing.
Is that your exercise?
Is that what you consider? It ends up being my exercise too. I mean, I could do some weight training and some more cardio, but yeah. And then my primary dance right now is actually called West Coast Swing, which I love. And I got involved in West Coast Swing because it's very hard to find an amateur partner in ballroom. And so therefore it's hard to dance as much as I wanted to. And so in West Coast Swing, the way you compete is you basically go sign up as a leader or a follower, and you get matched with someone randomly, and then you dance with them to random music, and you're basically judged. So it's all improvised, and that's how you compete in West Coast Swing. So that's my primary dance right now.
Any competitions coming up for you?
I just competed in San Jose 2 weeks ago at City Lights, and I probably will compete at Capitol in Sacramento, which is West Coast Swing. And then I'll probably compete in Portland, actually, at the Rose City.
Fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy, what a great activity. I know so many people who are out there dancing. It just hasn't not been my thing.
It is so fun.
Yeah. I just know so many people who are out there, and they use it as their form of exercise. That's what they're doing. And it's community, right? It's like what you do. It gets you out, and it gets you in a community of people and socializing.
Totally. It's social. I don't know. I feel like I'm always into metaphors and stuff. But for me, partner dancing, which is I like dancing. I do hip hop too, and I like all kinds of dancing. But I love partner dancing because it is that metaphor about relationship, about connection. The question of who's leading and following in a conversation, who's leading and who's following, right? In a relationship, who's leading, who's following, and what are the skill sets that you need to be in connection in any of those different situations. I just think partner dancing is such a metaphor for human connection.
I don't think you would have met resistance, but do you get raised eyebrows from people for having started dancing? I have to choose my words carefully.
Later in life?
Well, yeah, because I don't even like that.
I know, we need new language.
Yes, we do need new language. And I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, how about at 49?
At 49, exactly. So do you get raised eyebrows from people? Either in the community already or from just your friends?
Well, in the community, no, because the way that the community is set up is that you compete against your age category, and it's known that, we have different categories. One of the people that I'm most inspired by is now, I think her name's Quinn Bomage, and she was just on America's Got Talent, and I've been watching her for years and competing against her. She's amazing. She's I think she's 70 now, or pretty close to it. She's an incredible dancer. And so, we dance in age categories. So B is over 50, or B is, 35 to 50. C is over 50. I can't remember the exact categories, but we dance in age categories. So it's known. And in fact, the ballroom dance world, lots of people dance. A lot of people that have the time and money to dance are older women.
True. Yeah.
So I don't think that I get raised eyebrows. I would say that more than anything, I get a lot of support from people and a lot of encouragement, and a lot of people saying, wow, I'm really inspired by the fact that you started so late and that you got so involved and you're so committed to it and so passionate about it. I think I get that a lot, and I get that from people of all ages, actually. I think as I go down, and we'll talk about it, this idea about looking at how our society sees aging.
Well, let's dive right into that,
okay.
Because I think that's important. And one of the things, I just wrote this on my Facebook page. I don't know if you saw this or not, but when we were taking a lift to the airport yesterday morning to come down to the Bay Area, our Lyft driver was very chatty, and it was like 4:30 in the morning, and he was a young kid, and he was just chatting away, and he said, what do you do, and why are you guys traveling? Is it fun, or, is it work? And we said kind of a mix. He asked what I did, and I said, I run tours. I do tours for women, and we get to go to all these great places. And he said, oh, so like you do tours for middle-aged women. And I never use that term. I don't know where he got that from, but he said, oh, you do tours for middle-aged women. He said, yeah, maybe I should go on that, on one of those tours. And I was like, that's like in my head, I'm going, that's really weird. I said, why? And he said, sugar mama. And I said, these women could be your grandmother. Like, what do you think middle age is? And he said, oh, like 30s. I was like, dude, like just shut up right there. Oh my God.
Well, yeah.
So it's like all perspective, right? So here, I don't know how old he was, 19 or something. And he thought middle age was in the 30s.
I mean, I think it just goes to what you're sharing, highlights a bunch of things to me. One of them is that it's true that middle age or older is or mature or elder is seen in some ways earlier now, because in terms, especially in the Bay Area, when there's so much focus on people being young and, that kind of mindset, in some ways, we get to a place of having like a kind of more mature mindset, I think, at a younger age. So there's you're looking at me like you got your eyebrows raised. So you're like, what are you saying, Lisa?
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting thing. I think in some ways, the idea of being elder, when we're so youth, the more we become a youth-focused society, which we are, I think, in some ways increasingly, especially in the Bay Area, the more we see elder in earlier stages, but also the more we have relative wisdom at earlier ages.
Yeah, but it depends on the context,
It depends on the context.
Because in a technology world, like in the Bay Area or in Seattle, where we've got so much tech going on there, an elder person is going to be somebody in their 40s because they have 20 years
That's
of
what
tech.
I mean.
Yeah, they have.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. But outside of that context, an elder is going to be somebody who hopefully is in their 70s or 80s who brings a different kind of wisdom.
Well, so that's where I'm going next, is that even though ironically in some ways people are going to see a 30-year-old as being an elder, like if they're 19 and they live in the Bay Area where it's so focused that way, at the same time, we are living longer. Medical science is giving us so many more years. And I think I read a statistic recently that said something like people alive today, I can't remember the exact statistic, but a very high percentage, something like twice as many as 20 years ago are going to live to be 100. And so the thing is,
I read somebody say, please let that be Justice Ginsburg.
Please let that be what?
Justice Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Because they want her to live for a very long time. They said, like, let it be her that makes it to 150 or 180. Like, oh, please.
Exactly.
Which I thought was really funny.
That's good.
Yeah. Sorry.
But no, it's fine. But the thing is that as this happens and we get these longer ages, what's actually happening is that the middle ages are getting longer, right? It's not like we're going to get 20 or 30 more years of decrepit, like hopefully.
Right.
But what's happening is these years that we don't know how to call right now are changing. So many of the people, the women our age, probably as many as I do, incredible, vibrant, intelligent, energetic, people with so much to contribute to the world, right? And we are still living a little bit of an old story where we see maybe 35, maybe 50, we see it as over the hill, right? And this idea that once you get to be over the hill, it's all downhill from there. When I was about 51, I did a talk on the fact that, this is true. We're getting longer ages, but we need to change the story of what aging means in our culture. We don't have our brains, our mindset, and our branding around this particular number of decades hasn't changed enough. So we're living this old story about what it means to be 50.
Well, also, I mean, the term midlife crisis, or just it being in the middle of life, has always been strange to me, because you typically, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you thought of somebody in their midlife, they weren't necessarily 30. I don't think 30 was ever midlife, was it? I always thought
I remember 30 used to be the number that once you get there, it's all downhill. I think that in that movie, what's the movie? Once you get to be 30, you're like, that's it. 30 used to be the time. I mean, you're just living such a vibrant life. You don't even remember or relate to that.
Yeah, I guess
30
I don't.
used to be the time people thought of as, well, now you're really over the hill. But see, I don't really have, we should talk about this terminology. Like I said, I love terms and language and stuff. Like, what's the right language, right? You don't like midlife. But if I'm 54 and I'm midlife, that doesn't seem so bad. Like maybe, now I've entered the second half of my life. That means I'm going to live to be 108, right?
Yeah, but I guess the thing for me is that midlife, it is, in my mind, it conjures something up that makes me think that things are downhill from there, because it's midlife, it's like a peak, and then you go down. Now, I ran my first marathon at 50.
Yeah.
And when I was turning 50, I was telling people I'm halfway there, halfway to 100. Now, that's changed even since then. I'm 53 now. And there's so much talk of people living to be 120. Yesterday for the podcast, I talked to Alex Honnold's mom, and Alex is the young guy who soloed, free climbed up El Capitan. And I talked to his mom, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to live to be 125." So that's in our lexicon. That idea is in our thinking.
That's
already.
what Dave Asprey says too. Right?
Yeah, he said. I think he said 180.
Does he say 180? I know he has some number that he's aiming for.
I think it was 180. I was like, "Oh, dude, okay, well, there you go." But yeah, we do need to change that. But I think the thing that captured me about what you just said was that we've got this big stretch that we didn't necessarily anticipate, and we don't have the language for. And so then what happens?
We don't even have the image for it. So right now, if we think of it as going over a hill and going down, we're thinking of it like a roller coaster. The reality is that maybe it's more of a slow. Now our life cycle is a little bit more. Sure, there's ups and downs, but maybe it's more of a slow rise up and a slow rise down, and then drop off at the end. But yeah, I think we need new language. I really do. I think someone who was telling me recently, someone I interviewed, and was presenting this idea that, I love the icons and the archetypes, mother, maiden, crone, except that, okay, we go right from mother to crone. Like, hello, you don't go from mother to crone. There's like something in the middle. Is it queen? I don't know.
I like that. Yeah.
We need new monikers for ourselves, because we're bringing so much more. And like I say, I think our cultural iconography hasn't caught up. Our language, our rituals, our recognition, it just hasn't caught up. And there's this rich, and this is what I'm feeling so committed to. I just came back from this incredible retreat with the mastermind group that I'm involved with. And I just made this huge commitment for the next year to be a total stand for modeling and changing a reclamation of what these years mean, and how we talk about them, and how we live them, and how we support each other in extending our vibrancy and finding our most empowered, live out loud selves, doing the cool things like the stuff you're up to,
Well, have you come up with that language yet? Have you been thinking about that?
Well, my working title for my talk is "The Crone Needs New Clothes," but I don't really like crone, unless we need a rebranding of what these years are. We need new language, and I don't know what the language is. I don't know if it's finding a different word for midlife women, or 50 plus, or second half, or if it's changing what these current, or like reclaiming what these words mean. That's what happens a lot of times. You don't have a word, so you change what queer means. You change what you take on, and so maybe it's about rebranding those words, not coming up with new ones. I don't know. It's an exploration, but it's a big commitment that I have. It's a commitment that I have to amplifying women's voices who are doing amazing things, and it's a commitment that I have to growing my own skill set and to supporting other people in building the skill sets that we need to be more empowered, both financially, in terms of our voices, physically, to just really be like integrated in all the different aspects of life, and to supporting women in doing that.
Well, I think a big part of that has to be a financial too, because
totally.
We are set up, we've been threatened for, 20 years, maybe even longer now, that we're not going to have a social security system to help take care of us when we retire. And I'm talking you and I, literally not too far from from today, we could technically retire. I don't think I will.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I've never had a job. So like
Yeah,
I've always been entrepreneurial. So.
Yeah, I know. So we'll always be working and contributing in some way. But like, what is going to happen then? Because I think that part of that thinking and that cultural thinking is, okay, I'm theoretically late 50s, 60 years old. I have a few more years before I retire. And then maybe I'll have X number of dollars in my bank account that will last me until I'm 70. But oh shit, if I am any older than that, then I'm really screwed because I'm not going to have money. So I think that I think our thinking is tied into the financial aspect of how long it's financially practical for us to live. And if we don't have those finances, then we're not going to be taken care of. We might be homeless ourselves.
Okay, but hold on. Let me just interject one other thing, which I don't think you're meaning to imply. But even what you're talking about now is coming from the mindset of once you get to be 60, you're no longer capable of working or being vibrant. Now, of course, we have to be prepared for the possibility because that is part of our reality of getting older. So we might get sick. We might have to spend our energy taking care of parents or, so there's the possibility of not being able to work. But I think there's also the possibility that we have productive, engaged, involved lives for longer too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Both could be true.
Yes, but I also think, and I'm glad that you clarified that, but I think the thing here is that there are more people, let's just talk about in this country, there are more people in this country who don't enjoy their jobs, who are counting the days down until they retire, than there are people like you and I who are making our own way.
Yeah.
And so those people can't wait to retire and start getting their rightly due Social Security checks and being taken care of by the system. And our system just won't be able to handle that.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. I think that's really true. I have no idea the answer to that because I just don't really know that economic world and the governmental.
And I don't think anybody knows it because I think we're being fed a bunch of stuff that's probably not true.
And I'm hoping there's people sort of working on that. Like I like to say, we're all needed. That's not my skill set or my strength. What I would like to put attention on and what I want to be, engaging in terms of exploration is how to help those people find ways to be living more engaged lives. That, I think it doesn't matter who you are. If you are living a life that you don't like and you kind of want to retire from, when you get to be 65 and you retire from it, you may still be in the same mindset.
You're kind of spent.
You're kind of spent. And so for me, I do think there are more and more possibilities. I don't exactly know what it looks like for every person at any time, like completely. But I do think that the way our world is going is that there is a new possibility for having a mindset of creating your own way. And I think even if you're one of those people who has been working a job that you don't like or in a lifestyle that doesn't really work for you, there's always the possibility. I think that's the message that I want to say. It doesn't matter what's happened so far. There's always the opportunity to say, hey, I want something new. I want more empowerment. I want more freedom. I want to take on this thing I never thought I could do. It doesn't matter if you're 49 or 65.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that.
Of course you would because you're doing it.
Well, I know, but one of the things that comes to mind, though, is that, and I love this conversation, by the way, one of the things that comes to mind is that we're probably raising people right now, and you might know better than me, but I think that we're raising a generation or generations where these younger people already have that mindset that they are going to figure it out.
Yes.
And they're going to work different jobs and they're going to be creative and they're going to make businesses and they're going to see things go. And so when they get to 60 or 65, they're not going to have as much trouble. But maybe the issue is that we've got a population right now that includes us, and it includes maybe a generation ahead of us and a generation behind us
that don't know they have agency.
The majority, maybe 90% of the population doesn't realize that. Now, some of them have been forced to figure it out, and others are probably destitute or desperate because they can't or they don't think that they can figure it out. So somehow I'm like, here's a little business idea for you and I to figure this out, to get the word to that population, that our generation ahead, generation back, of like, this is what's coming up. let's make the most of it. Let's be productive. And then hopefully those 2 generations behind, those younger people are, and your kids are going to be able to figure that out because they've seen that
they've been raised in it, right?
Yes, they have figured out that they have to make their own way in the world.
They're natives to it. I love millennials. And the next generation. Like I find whenever I have something I'm trying to figure out, whether it has to do with parenting or a way of thinking about the world, I will go to my young friends. Say, tell me what you think about this, because there's just a different orientation in the world. They grew up with different perspectives. And I just think, the young people that I know, the young people that I have in my life, they're just so, they just have such a different perspective so much. So I think you're exactly right. I'm just basically saying, yes, I think that it's true that these generations are going to have a different perspective on things than we have. And there's so much learning to be had from interacting with them. And we have different perspectives from which they can benefit too. I think intergenerational wisdom and knowledge and sharing is really powerful. And, going back to the whole independent learning thing, I like to get out of anything that puts age silos on things. That's what school does. It puts you in a little age silo. Whereas if you're independently learning, you have a lot more access to different age people. And I think that for us as older, as people in different stage of life, to me, our natural way of being in the world is always be changing, always be reinventing, always be growing. It doesn't matter how old we are. It's when we start to ossify, when we start to get stuck in our ways. That's what being old is. Otherwise, we're perennial. We just keep recreating ourselves in new ways. Okay, maybe this part of me dies. Maybe this part of my physicality goes away. But okay, I'm going to recreate in a different way.
Regenerate.
But yes, I agree. I think there's some business idea, some opportunity for contribution in helping people of our generation and the generations before and after us embrace and enter into and identify their strengths, and use them and find ways that they can contribute, because that's where purpose and passion and life and the regeneration that is going to create meaning.
Do you have a plan right now in how to do that?
Well, I'm working on course development. In about 6 weeks, I'm going to launch a course, and I don't exactly have the name yet, but it's going to be to support probably women. The first one I'm going to do is probably going to be focused on women in transition, either from a job or from parenting or from a divorce, like from a marriage, or from, just in a transitional stage in their life who feel stuck. Or feel like they don't exactly know where they're going, or don't exactly know where their purpose is coming from, to help them transition into a place of thriving in it. So that's something I'm working on developing. I haven't coached in years and years. I haven't had individual clients in about 10 years, but I'm going to take on a small group of coaching clients in the next little bit, because I want to have direct one-on-one interaction with people to learn, what is it that people need in this stage? What is it that's in the way? And I want to have a little bit more direct insight into that. It's kind of like research for me. So those are a couple ways I'm planning on looking at it. I'm going to keep on my show highlighting and amplifying people's voices. I'm going to be doing a lot more speaking in the next year or two. And performing. I have a talk that I want to do a new iteration on that is about reclaiming aging and seeing how we see age, and then it involves doing a dance too. So combining those two things.
Mm-hmm. So you've got a plan.
I have some plans. I have some things I'm excited about. Yes.
Yeah. I haven't given it enough thought, like having a course or something like that. But I think that's pretty critical. But I think having more people, more women, but more people in general talking about this. And, the first time you hear someone say, I'm going to live to be 120, you think, oh, that's crazy. And then more and more and more and more people are talking about it, and they're pushing the limits. And I think the more that conversation is had, the more it's going to make people think of that as a possibility. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think part of it is, I do think that people get to an age and they just say, yeah, I'm kind of done. I'm bored, or my family's passed away, or my dog died, or whatever it is, and I'm just ready. But I think if we can give people things to live for, it's kind of, there's no, it's just a number, and as long as we can make it so that it's not a long decline, that we're not just keeping people alive for the sake of keeping them alive for 5 years,
No, you want to live during your life.
Exactly.
And, I think the three things that I would point to as starting places for people who don't necessarily see the way through to that is learning, creating, and contributing. If you're stuck in some way, then I think the thing to do is to look at what is there I want to learn about? What is there I want to know about? What is there I want to expand in terms of my mind or my own growth? Who do I need to learn from? And maybe it's younger people. And then the second one is creating. Like, what can I do in the world that's going to actually make something? And maybe that's writing. My dad's now doing a bunch of writing about stories from his youth. My dad's always a creative person. He's a photographer, and he's always doing some kind of project. He just has a beautiful book of portraits of Toronto jazz musicians. And, he's always creative. He's a piano player. He's always learning. But what is it that I can create in the world, whether it's writing or, art or learn pottery or something? And then where can I contribute, right? And contribution can take on any form. It doesn't have to be, I have friends who are really contributing in terms of the political world right now, and I'm so appreciative for them doing that. That's not my way. My way has to do more with individual people or groups or small groups. And but like looking for where you can contribute to someone, whether it's someone younger by mentoring them or someone older by taking care of them or taking them food. I think those are great starting points, Yeah, I think, but what you say is true, is that like, how do we support people in bringing more life to their years? Yeah.
That's going to be key. What's your superpower? I don't know if I've listened to quite a number of your episodes, but I don't know if you've talked about it specifically.
About my own?
Yeah.
I don't actually. I would say that my superpower is connecting people and ideas. I tend to see the big picture, and I am interested in, like I said, a lot of disparate pieces. I like to see the underlying essence and the connection between them. That's why I like the metaphors and how things relate to each other. And I also like bringing people together and introducing them to other people they should know, or building communities of people that can collaborate on projects, or just, have a tribe of, like-minded people.
Did you grow up with a big group of people in Toronto, like a big family?
I didn't have a big immediate family. There's just my father and my mother and my sister and me.
What's the age difference with your sister?
My sister and I are 14 months apart.
Oh, gosh.
My sister is an amazing, I have her on one of my favorite episodes, actually. She's a singer-songwriter, and she skipped a grade. So we were in the same grade from grade 6 or 7, something like that.
No kidding, wow.
Yeah, so we had a lot of the same friends, and she was very little, and she was very physically small, but she's a powerhouse person and really amazing. But so we grew up in some ways as more like twins in a way. And then we have sort of some extended family, but not a lot. My parents both had one sibling each. And so it's not a large family. But what we did have, and I talk about this on one of my episodes, is that my parents were always about creating community. My parents had a lot of friends. My sister had her own group of friends. I went to a different high school, so I had my friends. And all the time I was growing up, we had at least once a year over at Christmas or New Year's, we had a Japanese New Year celebration. My mom was Japanese Canadian. And we had all the people from all of our families. We had parties all the time where my sister's musician friends and my parents' musician friends and my acting friends would all come together. And so now I went back to a concert my sister had in September, and I looked around, there was like 60, 70 people there. And most of the people in that room I have known for between 30 and 50 years, and they have known each other for that long through our family network. So yeah, I'd say that like I have deep, deep roots to community and connection.
And that was part of your family, part of your upbringing.
Through music. And that's what my interview with my sister is about, is connection through music and how music kind of brings us together, and because it was a big part of my family.
Did your parents ever move to California also, or
No.
did they were always in Canada?
My parents were always in Canada, yeah.
And your dad is alive?
My dad's still in Toronto, yeah.
Oh, it's still in Toronto. Mm-hmm. Does he make it down to the Bay Area?
He comes sometimes, yeah. He comes every once in a while. I'm hoping he's going to come out in the next month or two. Yes, with his new partner. So I'm hoping they're going to come out.
What else would you like to cover today? Is there anything that...
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, I really appreciated the deeper dive into the whole age thing, because I think that is such an important topic. And it's something that I've been... Like, I think just to go back to this,
yeah.
You just brought up such an important point that we are in this like no woman's land.
Yes, exactly.
Where we're stretching it.
We're pioneers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're stretching that time.
Yes.
And there's no reason why we have to listen to what we have thought were cultural norms about being able to exercise beyond a certain age, or to only do a certain kind of exercise or do a Jane Fonda thing,
Yep.
Yeah. So I just think looking at it like that and just realizing that is being way stretched, and just looking at opportunities, realizing, I think it is important for people to realize the financial aspect of it and to make plans for that.
And empower ourselves financially.
And empower ourselves through it.
Empower ourselves, get more comfortable. One of the things I'm going to bringing a lot more people on my show that have to do with financial literacy for women, negotiation skills, a lot of the areas that we haven't necessarily historically felt like it's our strength. And because I think it's true that yes, all the governmental stuff is important and like preparing for the future and all that stuff, but also let's just empower ourselves more.
We have the technology,
yes.
We have the electronic technology,
yes.
but we also have the medical technology
yes. to
extend healthy, happy lives.
Right. And so that's the other thing I was going to say is that, there's all these, I'm interested in this from so many different directions, right? One is, how do we see aging differently? How do we live into aging differently? But the other thing is, how do we actually increase our ability to, be healthy into greater years? Like I've done a lot of personal stuff on intermittent fasting because I think that it's really healthy long term.
Yeah, sure
what
is.
are the other ways that we can extend and here's again, we get into language. I don't necessarily know if I want to say youthful, but healthful, right? How do we make our years from now for the next 30 or 40 healthful, vibrant, engaged, sexual, sensual, physical, intellectually stimulating, empowered? Those are all the things that I want to kind of blow open. How we live it, how we interact with it, and how we present it and how it's seen on all the different directions. The branding of it, but the reality of it too. And the thing that is another thing we haven't talked about, but I just want to presence it a little bit, is grief and dying and loss and aging. It's kind of the flip side of the coin, right? It's like, how do we hold the reality that this is where we're going, and
meaning
death and aging? How do we hold it in such a way that we can be both graceful and gracious with that as our future, but also live into it fully? I mean, I guess that quote, like rage into the dying of the light, that Dylan Thomas would, I guess there's something to that. It's been a little bit too quoted, for my taste, but there's something about how do we hold these seemingly disparate things of both accepting aging and death, but also living fully in the presence of its approach. And how do we live and engaged and perennially, there's got to be a different word, not youthful, but like vibrant.
Vibrant. I think that's vibrant's a perfect word for it.
Vibrant. How do we age vibrantly? I don't know. I'm all about all the language. If your listeners or you or anybody have new ways of new words, new language that we can be adding into this conversation, I'm all about it.
Yeah. Well, I think vibrant is, for me, that's what resonates most. I think it's twofold. I think it's being aware of yourself, and I think it's taking care of yourself.
Oh, exactly.
Because
beautiful.
I think the problem is that we live in the world, and we go to a restaurant that serves you a meal that has a burrito that should actually be 3 meals, and you're paying $7 or $8 for that. And you think that because it's served to you on a plate that you should eat that whole thing. And that's 2 days worth of calories right there. But that happens to us every moment of every day. We're surrounded
We're served
by
up
that.
something that somebody believes is what we have, and we eat it without questioning it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Metaphorically and physically.
Exactly. So, but food and drink and smoking and whatever it is, whatever the vice might be, food isn't a vice, it can be. Sugar, whatever that is, we just do things because it's accepted culturally. And when we become aware of what we're doing to ourselves, it brings everything into a whole new light. And then we can become healthy of mind and of body once we become aware of that. But you can't have vibrancy if you're not being aware of that stuff.
Self-awareness is absolutely
my personal belief.
I totally agree with you. I think the starting point for almost everything that's healthy and vibrant is self-awareness. It's like you have to sit with what's really true. What's really true? What do I feel? What do I need? What do I want? What do I think? What do I think?
One of the episodes that I listened to of your podcast was the one on alcohol.
Oh, yes,
And
with Rachel Hart.
Yeah, I found that really interesting because that is all about awareness.
Yeah.
Why am I going home and having a glass of wine every night at 5:00, when I get home from work?
And what's my thinking? I think her thing is, what's my thought that's leading to my behavior?
Exactly.
What's my feeling? What's my thought? What's the connection between, I think the way that her model goes is you have a thought and that thought creates a feeling and that feeling creates an action. And that if you get really aware of, the relationship between thinking, feeling, and acting, then you have a lot more choice.
Yeah. And it can be, and like I said, it's not just alcohol. It can be anything. It's the burrito. It's the bag of chips. It's the bag of popcorn or the bowl of popcorn or whatever it is. I think that's the real critical thing. But I don't think that you can be vibrant until you are tuned into those things.
So agree. So agree.
Yeah. So let's tune in.
Yeah.
Get tuned in. Unless you have something else that you want to chat about specifically. You talked about.
Oh, we could just talk forever. I think now, we have to figure out time for you to come on my show now.
Oh, I would love that.
Yes.
I would love that. But we should, just as we kind of wrap up here, I like to end with asking, what does it mean to you to be bold?
I'm going to say that being bold is being unrelentingly, unapologetically, fearlessly true to who you are and willing to live in integrity, which to me is when your actions and your words match. When what you say and when there's no division or there's no major rift between what you say and what you do. And that being bold is the willingness to see what's in front of you and what's within you with a clear view, with a kind of clarity of vision.
Do you think that you live by that every day? 90% of your day? 50% of your day?
Ooh, I like that question. That's a really great question.
Because we don't always do that.
No.
We do things that go against what we say or what we want to believe about ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's where authenticity comes into it, right? So I can say that I believe that being bold is living in integrity is when what you say and what you do match. And I could say that as long as authenticity and honesty is part of your personal culture, that you could do that most of the time. So the truth might be that I'm, struggling with, I don't know, whatever it is. I'm struggling with feeling committed to my exercise routine or whatever. And that, right now I'm just making this up. I'm trying to think of something that would be a good example. Like, I don't feel like I'm worth it, or I'm going to eat something that I shouldn't eat or whatever. I think as soon as you're authentic, this is not a very good example actually, but that I think as long as you're authentic about what you're struggling with, then you can still be in integrity.
Well,
you don't have to be perfect.
Let's say you take a break from dancing.
Yeah.
And you're questioning whether are you being lazy about it and you just don't want to get up and go out into the cold and go to your dance class. Is your point to kind of explore, am I just taking a break because my body's tired and I need to take a break? Or am I really just being lazy here because I don't feel like getting dressed?
Okay, so I think as I'm trying to feel into what you're saying, here's what I'm going to get to. I think the essence of what I believe is that we are essentially good. And we can actually trust ourselves more than we think we can. And so if there's anything in you or in me that might have, or anything in what I said that might be implying that, we have to be perfect or better, or integrity means that we're these completed, done, perfect, people who only say good things and only do them. I didn't mean that so much. I meant more that.
And I didn't take it that way at all.
No, I just, there's a subtlety to where what we're feeling around here that I'm trying to get at. And I think it has to do with the fact that the kind of integrity that I'm after in my life has to do with pretty radical self-acceptance and a presencing what's true in every moment. And that's available to me and to everyone at all times, and that it's not always easy because our culture doesn't necessarily promote it or accept it or celebrate it. But that the more that I can just be in, hey, here's what's real, here's what's really true for me in this moment, the more I can be authentic and self-aware, like you said, the more I'm also in a mode of kind of celebration. And I'm feeling like I'm not quite getting at what I'm trying to say, because it's kind of subtle, this piece. And you've opened up, I'm going to have to go, like I'm going to be driving home thinking about this bold thing and what does it mean and how do I see it and how do I explain it in a way. I guess it comes down to, like I say, some aspect of like knowing we're already done. And in an ironic way, knowing we're already done and we're already complete and we're already perfect and we're already fine gives us access into integrity if we just be with it. Like we don't have to do that much to be in integrity. It's not really hard work or like some pedestal that we have to try to get ourselves to. It actually just has to do with acceptance of what is and living into what is, instead of hearing these cultural stories, having this metaphorical burrito and just eating it. Instead, just saying that, all is well. I'm already okay. And so are you. And that just getting that, whatever we need to do to get that, whether it's meditation or doing something we love or writing or conversing with other people or having religion or whatever it is, that whatever it is we need to do to get to that, that's going to take us right to living in integrity. And that's bold. Does that make more sense?
I understand that. I just think it's really hard work.
I guess,
I just think it's when you talk about complete acceptance.
Yeah.
That's really difficult because it almost feels like it's getting more difficult because of the things that we're exposed to. And by that, I mean specifically Facebook. We have certain things that we have to live up to. We don't have to, but I'm just saying that when you go on your Facebook feed and look, I feel sorry for people who are friends with me on Facebook, because on the one hand, I'm constantly posting these photos of all the great stuff I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And if somebody's having a difficult time financially or emotionally or whatever, and they're seeing this, mm-hmm. then they're like, I want that. I can't have that. There's that part of it.
It's such an interesting thing you're raising. It's
so I think today it is more difficult to be okay with who you are, because we are so exposed to everyone's perfect, quote unquote, perfect life, when we know in the background it's not so perfect, but that's what we see.
I guess. I mean, yes. I understand what you're saying. And I think that any conversation around this is not fully responsible unless we acknowledge whatever privilege we have, right? And so obviously you and I, in certain ways, we live very privileged lives on a lot of different counts. And that's important to recognize and to not flippantly say, well, of course, anyone can have this, and I don't in any way want to present that idea, because I think the first part of being, of having humility is recognizing your privilege. But I would say that many people have their own privilege. And some of that, and I don't, like, privilege cannot take on a little bit of a dirty word these days. So that's why I like the idea of strengths or gifts or, and privilege does have the same meaning. But sometimes it takes a little bit of uncovering of what yours is or what hers is. And it might be different from yours or from mine or whatever. But I think for most people, for many people with some searching and some self-reflection, that there's the possibility of getting to that piece of gold and living out of it. And everybody has struggles. And the more we can live authentically and be true about what it is, the better. And I have this thing about Facebook, because I always hear about how it makes people feel less than. Well, we live in a culture where people feel less than. We live in a culture where there's the burrito is, hey, that is the burrito, the metaphorical burritos. I'm just going to serve you something up, and what that is you should feel less than or too much, but really
or when you look at a 3/4 burrito, you think you didn't get enough.
Right. And so that's why I'm saying, to me, the boldness isn't working harder to be in integrity or to be in acceptance. The boldness is in having the courage to kind of sink into, relax into, surrender into it. I had a guest, David Savage, who is an empath. And at one point in the conversation, I said something like, the power of the feminine is like working hard to just really, I can't remember what I said, but I said something about working, like it's all about like keeping on working towards surrendering or something. And he said, oh, no, the feminine does not. He said, could I invite you to even consider that language? It's not about work, and so he said something. I was like, wow, yes. It's so easy for us to go to this idea that we have to work hard. It's the air we are surrounded in. It's just like we're being fed this all the time. We have to work harder to get to where we want to go. No, the boldness is, and I don't say I have the answer. I don't know. This is a struggle for me. This is my process in my life. But the boldness is finding those ways into remembering that we're good. We're done. It's all gravy. And that's a process. That's, as human beings, that's our edge. That's our growing edge. Culturally, and just, I think we have these, competing forces in us.
What's your process?
My process?
Is it religion? Is it meditation? Is it exercise?
I'd love to meditate more than I do. I think there's great value in that, and I think it would be a great way in for me. I know a lot of people in my world seem to be really interested in psychedelics as a way in. It's not been my way. It's hasn't been my way.
Ayahuasca kind of thing?
Ayahuasca or like microdosing. Like there's a big movement I'm seeing in my world where that's a huge, like ceremony type, sacred plant medicine and stuff like that. That's not been my way. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'd say I'm relational. I get my reminders of what's possible through my connection with people, through trying to contribute to their experience in the world, to their sense of themselves, to their remembering of themselves, to appreciating them. To more recently, the last couple of years have been really hard years for me, and I've just been the beneficiary of so much generosity from such a wide range of people that I know. And I'd say it's almost like a spiritual practice of just recognizing the gift that's been in my life, and how, so it's the relational piece for me that's like, oh, wow, this is life.
How many people do you encounter in a day? Do you bring your daughter she's probably independent enough that she's
encounter to what degree?
Like, do you have conversations with the barista, and then are you taking your daughter to classes and you're talking to other moms, mm-hmm. and then you're recording a podcast and mm-hmm. you're chatting with someone?
I'm talking to people all the time. Yeah. Okay, and I'm not saying everybody needs to do that. I am someone who likes to be.
And I'm just curious what that means to you, because you don't have a day job where you are surrounded by a group of people. So I'm just wondering, because I find myself, I work from home.
Yeah.
So when I go to the post office, I'm like, hey, Steve, how you doing? Like, what's up? Are you working this weekend?
Oh, I will talk to people always. I will, whoever I'm around, I'll talk to them for sure. And I'm out a lot, and I'm not a stay-at-home type person. If I am home, I usually have people over to my house.
Okay.
I'm pretty...
So you're good about reaching out and about socializing and maybe calling up a girlfriend or...
Yeah, I'm actually kind of a group. I have some close friends, but I'm actually a group person. I like groups. I like to be in groups. I like to be at talks. I like to be in... I really, really love conscious and intentional group situations where there's a conversation that's everyone's together in the conversation, or there's something that people are working on together. I like that a lot. But yeah, I'm interacting with people a lot. It's my, like, what did you say? What did you ask me the question? What's my process or my...
What is your process?
Yeah. And I would say, honestly, my connections with people is my process, is my religion in a way, or something like that. It's like, I just really value the interchange between human beings and what we can give to each other and what we can receive. And just this last couple of years have been hard. And I was not before that someone who would necessarily reach out for help or even be that great at accepting it. But what I've learned in the last couple of years is that, wow, what a gift it is to be the recipient of other people's generosity, which makes me want to be generous towards people more and more, which makes me realize that people probably enjoy being generous towards me.
Yeah.
Like, what a beautiful reciprocity of life that is. To me, that's like the ultimate spirituality.
Yeah, it's like being of service, and being selfless is almost selfish.
Exactly.
Because in turn, it makes you feel good.
Or as my friend and guest and, holistic psychotherapist extraordinaire Victoria Lorient says, it's being selfie. Mm-hmm. She has what's your self culture is her moniker. It's like it's not being selfish. It's being selfie. And then that's a gift to other people. But yeah, the degree to which we can... The thing that I was just thinking as you were talking is being a contribution or being of service. To me, like I say, we're all needed, and there are people out there who are doing incredible things in terms of impact culture companies and like really being of service. But I think you can do it in the smallest of ways. Just saying to someone, wow, you just look so beautiful today. Or thank you so much for blah, blah, blah. The smallest of ways can be such a huge gift to people. That's my religion, I think.
Yeah. Great. Where can people find you?
I'd love to have your listeners come in and visit my show also, SuperPower U Podcast on any podcast platform. Online, I'm lisabetts.com. I'm on Instagram, lisabetts and SuperPower U. I'd love them to join my Facebook page, which is SuperPower U. Those are my primary monikers.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'll link to all those in the show notes.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. What a beautiful and deep conversation.
This was great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected.
Me too. And I just so appreciate, I told you before that I wasn't sure, but wow, it's amazing you do this in-person thing, but just being able to sit with you and feel you and look into your eyes. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
I know. It's a nice connection.
Yes.
You can add me to your list of people you talk to today.
Yeah.
That part of the conversation about aging and the language around it, that ranks as one of my favorite conversations with a guest because it is such an important topic. Language is everything, and if we start thinking about age and coming up with new words around it, it really has the power to change our culture. Don't forget to enter to win a pair of Bluetooth headphones from Jaybird. All you need to do is email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com and tell me your 3 favorite episodes of the She's Bold podcast and why those episodes are your favorite. You'll get an extra entry if you're subscribed to the She's Bold podcast newsletter, which announces each new episode. You can find a link to how to enter in the show notes and at shesboldpodcast.com/Jaybird. For links to all the things we chatted about in this episode, go to shesboldpodcast.com, and there you will find the show notes for this and all episodes. You can also find those links and show notes in whatever podcast app it is that you use to listen to this. While you're there on the website, don't forget to check out my Patreon page. It's basically a way for you to say, yes, I like what I'm hearing on the She's Bold podcast, and I'm willing to support the show and get some special benefits. And you'll have access to some really fun bonus content as well. You can find out more by going to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon. You can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm WonderGal on Instagram. And you can be sure that if we're friends or you're following me, you're going to see some incredible photos of India and also Morocco. So please friend me on Facebook, WonderGal on Instagram. Follow me there. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group. You're going to love the positivity in that group, the encouragement and the support from that community. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. And until next time, be bold.